Footnotes from the Life Application Study Bible. Jewish legal tradition had 39 categories of activities forbidden on the Sabbath, and harvesting was one of them. The teachers of religious law even went so far as to describe different methods of harvesting. One method was to rub the heads of grain between one's hands, as the disciples were doing here. God's law said that farmers were to leave the edges of their fields unplowed so travelers and the poor could eat from this bounty. Thus, the disciples were not guilty of stealing grain. Neither were they breaking the Sabbath by doing their daily work on it. In fact, though they may have been violating the Pharisees' rules, they were not breaking any divine law. Each week, 12 consecrated loaves of bread, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, will be placed on a table in the temple. This bread was called the bread of the presence. After its use in the temple, it was to be eaten only by priests. Jesus accused of breaking the Sabbath, referred to a well-known story about David. On one occasion, when fleeing from Saul, David and his men had eaten this sacred bread. Their need had been more important than the ceremonial regulations. Jesus was explaining that human need is more important than human regulations and rules. Once again, these Pharisees, who were scrutinizing Jesus' every word, were stumped by his wisdom. By comparing himself and his disciples to David and his men, Jesus was saying, "If you condemn me, you must also condemn David." When Jesus said that he was Lord, even over the Sabbath, he was once again proclaiming his own divinity. He had the authority to overrule the Pharisees' traditions and regulations because he had created the Sabbath. The Creator is always greater than his creation. According to the tradition of the religious leaders, no healing could be done on the Sabbath. Healing, they said, was practicing medicine, and a person could not practice his or her profession on the Sabbath. The religious leaders were more concerned about protecting their laws than freeing a person from painful suffering. They were concerned with negatives, what rules should not be broken, what activities should not be done. Jesus was positive, doing good and helping those in need. Which would an objective observer say is more characteristic of your faith in Jesus, the positive or the negatives? Are you more concerned about what people shouldn't be doing than you are about advancing God's kingdom? Is your way of being a Christian the only way? And is this legalistic attitude prevalent in your church? The Pharisees thought their religious system had all the answers. They could not accept Jesus because he did not fit into their system. Beware of thinking that you or your church has all the answers. No religious system is big enough to contain Jesus completely or to perfectly fulfill all his desires for the world. Christianity is the most positive force to ever hit this planet. Make sure you don't let it degenerate into a list of negatives. Show how the church is meant to be a safe, welcoming, and joyful community. Jesus' enemies were furious. Not only had he read their minds, but he had also flouted their laws and exposed the hatred in their hearts. Ironically, their hatred combined with their zeal for the law drove them to plot murder, an act that was clearly against their law.